All right, why don't we get started? Good evening, and my name is Robert Pomprian, Ayer's Town Administrator, and welcome to the Town of Ayer's Public Informational Forum for the proposed government reorganization articles for the special Fall Town Meeting to be held on Monday, October 23rd, 2017, at 7 p.m. in the auditorium of the Ayer Shirley Regional High School. I'm pleased to be joined this evening with Ms. Susan Copeland, Ayer's Town Clerk, Tax Collector, and Treasurer. The focus of tonight's forum will be the factual information related to Articles 1 through 4, and most importantly, to answer your questions on these articles. Before we get started, just a couple of ground rules to facilitate the evening. Tonight's forum is being filmed by APAC, and the video will be posted to the town's website. We're also doing some live tweets and Facebook posts through our IT department throughout the evening. This is an informational forum to provide the public with factual information and to answer any questions. This is not a political or advocacy forum, nor a town meeting debate. We ask that all political and positional and advocacy comments be reserved for town meeting on the 27th. If we could ask you to just state your name and your question clearly when we do the questions, we will be posting your questions and the answers on the website as well, because if you have a question, most likely somebody else has the same question. We'll only use your first name for the posting purposes, and we'll take all questions after the brief presentation. We ask that you sign in on the green sign-in sheet and take copies of the three handouts. We're getting some more copies for those who just came in. The three handouts are, one is the special Fall Town Meeting warrant for October 23rd. The other one is the 2010 Town Government Study Report. Of specific note is page 5, having to do with the tax collector. And then the third one is a memo that I sent on October 4th, 2017 to the Finance Committee that we'll be using tonight that highlights the proposed differences on Article 3, the Town Manager article. These materials, after tonight, the warrant is already posted on the town's website, but all of these materials will be posted on the website. Additionally, with respect to the warrant, all households in Ayer will receive a hard copy in the mail at least 1 week before the town meeting. They're also posted throughout town, and if you need additional hard copies, they are available here at the town hall. We also ask that you check out the October 3rd, 2017 Board of Selectmen meeting video and the October 4th, 2017 Finance Committee video on the town's website, as both meetings provide in-depth discussion on these articles. On the October 3rd meeting, the Board of Selectmen discussed in great detail Articles 1 through 4, and they were also joined by Town Council Attorney Lauren Goldberg, who is also a recognized expert on municipal reorganization and elections. And the FinCom, Ms. Copeland and I appeared before on October 4th, and we had an in-depth discussion with them as well. So again, both of those videos are on the website. This video will also be posted on the website. Finally, the deadline to register to vote for the October 23rd special Fall Town Meeting will be this Friday, October 13th. The town's clerk's office will be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., so from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. just for the purposes of registering to vote. And most importantly, don't forget to attend the town meeting on Monday, October 23rd, 2017 at 7 p.m. up at the high school auditorium. So Susan and I have a very brief presentation to give you an overview, and then of course we want to get all of your questions and provide you with the answers. But let's just start briefly with the warrant, which is the first handout. There were 14 articles on the warrant, and at the end of the forum I'd be happy to answer any questions as well on the non-governmental articles as well. But for the purposes of this, we're going to focus on Articles 1 through 4. And before we get into the details of them, just to explain the proposed mechanics of the 4 articles. The 4 articles are what they call special act articles. In other words, Article 1 is a special act establishing an appointed town clerk. Article 2, establishing a appointed treasurer, tax collector. And Article 3, an act establishing a town manager form of government. And Article 4, establishing a appointed tree warden. So how it just works mechanically, so everybody understands the process, is at town meeting on the 23rd, the articles will be read and will be moved by the Board of Selectmen and seconded. The articles will then be open for discussion and debate through the moderator. If, and I will emphasize, if the articles pass, all 4 articles require a simple majority to pass. If they pass, they are then submitted by the town clerk to the state legislature. The state legislature then has to review and vote on them. That process, the legislature, we anticipate, obviously will not convene till January of 2018. And generally speaking, the timeline for that can be anywhere from 3 months to 18 months, we've been told, for the legislative process. If the legislature approves them, they are then sent back to the town, and these acts will go into effect. And we will speak to specifically in Article 1, which has to do with the town clerk. If it was to go into effect, the incumbent elected town clerk would become the first appointed town clerk for the balance of that term. The treasurer tax collector, which would be one position, would be vacated, and we'll talk about the hiring process on that. And Article 3, the incumbent town administrator would be the first appointed town manager for the balance of his term, which we'll get into. And the same for Article 4, if passed, the incumbent elected tree warden, who was elected last year, would be the first appointed tree warden to serve out the balance of his term. And we'll get more into that momentarily, but I just wanted to give just a general overview of the mechanics of how each of the 4 articles work. So with that, we'll get right into the brief presentation, starting with Article 1, which is a special act to establish an appointed town clerk, and I would ask Ms. Copeland to lead this part of the discussion.
Thank you. So again, I'm Susan Copeland, the town clerk, tax collector, treasurer for the town of Ayer, and currently elected in all 3 positions. First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming, because I was nervous we wouldn't have anybody, and I know everybody sitting in this room would think, why wouldn't we be here? But when you have 5,500 registered voters in the town, and how important town meeting the decisions are being made, coming here means a lot, that we're all working toward this together. So I thank you for taking your time and coming. So to begin with, Article 1 is establishing, so what we're doing, also as a footnote, we're dividing the positions. So it's currently, and it always has been, elected town clerk, elected tax collector, elected treasurer. They're 3 separately elected positions. So the question has always been, well, what if one person won the town clerk seat and one person won the tax collector seat? And though it hasn't ever happened, it could perceivably happen in an election. One person could only pull papers for one position, etc. So in looking into that, how to move forward in working with other clerks, other collectors and treasurers, majority towns have a treasurer collector. We're a treasurer tax collector, which is different from a town collector. That's a different title. We're not going for town collector. It's the same tax collector treasurer, combining those 2 together, and then a separate town clerk. So those are the positions the separation that we're moving forward with, as well as the appointed. So, for town clerk, for elected positions, your qualifications are 18 years old and a registered voter. Your accountability is once every 3 years to the voters, or you could be recalled, but there's no limits on vacation time, personal days, or sick time, and personal policies don't apply. Appointed, it brings it to a more professional credentials with education and experience. Appointed is the DLS, which is the Division of Local Services, Department of Revenue, the draft of the 2017 master plan, the 2010 town government study, which I believe there's a copy of as well, recommended an appointed town clerk. So it does change the accountability and also aligns into a more cohesive department heads. That way everybody's sort of on the same level, and the department heads have even recommended as well. So your accountability is still to the residents. You are appointed. You would be appointed through the Board of Selectmen, the town administrator. You'd be reporting to the town administrator or manager for question 3. But your accountability is still to the residents. 90%, 85-90% of a town clerk's position is driven by Mass General Law and the Secretary of State's office. So there isn't, in the daily work, your notifications, your timelines, etc. It's still Mass General Law, and if you're not following these guidelines, deadlines, etc., your accountability is also there. So that's, I don't want to go on, but so it does change it. Currently, it is a part-time position. So it's currently grade 11 with no step as part-time. It's a 20-hour position. That's $32,748. Elected salaries are approved at town meeting, as we know, in May. The proposed appointed grade 11 step 5, 40 hours, is based on the grid. The non-compensation grid was $65,939.04. And ultimately, the budgets are still approved through town meetings, so the salary is still approved in the omnibus level. You have your approval. So that's a very quick synopsis of everything. So combining tax collector and treasurer, it's the same thing for both positions, for all the positions for elected. Your qualifications are 18 years old and a registered voter. And this is, that's a lot to ask somebody to come into in 2017. And I can speak to that as someone working in this field, to have someone who may feel they have the qualifications, but to truly understand the responsibility to this position and to the town. The same is for the accountability and the personnel. Appointed, again, is professional credentials and an education and experience background. It's the same, the DLS, DOR supports it. The Municipal Act actually supports the treasurer and tax collector positions being combined and being appointed. And it is more common in the past 2 to 3 years throughout the Commonwealth that more communities are moving in this direction. The funding, so the money part, currently the collector and the treasurer again are part-time positions, if you will, at $40,026. The proposed appointed grade 11 step 1 to 3, depending on qualifications, is $59,000 to $62,500. So the cost impact would be on the current pay, and the proposed pay is the net cost is the $1,101.63. So that's the brief synopsis, and we can continue. That's all I have. Right? Yep. Yeah. So. Do you
Okay.
want to do questions now or continue?
So that's Article 1 and Article 2. And then why don't we we'll do an overview of all the articles and then come back to the question. So the next is Article 3, an act establishing a town manager. And if you would, the third handout, which is has my initials on it, it's a memo that the FinCom had requested on October 4th, and I encourage you to check out that video of that meeting as well, as I mentioned in the beginning. We're going to use this as sort of a follow sheet on this. First and foremost, it's very easy. The first question is, well, what is the difference between a town administrator and a town manager? And we get caught up in the nomenclature, the difference between administrator versus manager. Additionally, to further complicate it, in Massachusetts, there is think of a spectrum, a range that you can have in a town manager form of government. And what I mean by a range is the range of authority. So in the most pure sense, which we're not putting forth in the most extreme sense, a town manager has authorization to hire and fire all of the department heads, the chiefs, the employees, and so forth on the personnel end. That's not what we're proposing for Ayer. Additionally, as you will see momentarily, we have tried very hard to preserve the functions of our elected boards and so forth, which are policy-making boards, which we'll get into as well. So why this change? And what is this change? The reason the change is coming forth, and when we mention the Division of Local Services and the Department of Revenue as recommending these moves, these are, if you will, best practice recommendations in the area of municipal government. And what is being proposed in terms of a town manager, as I'll show you, is to really focus on improving two areas. And what do I mean by improving? Meaning improving customer service and the administration of government to the benefit of you, the taxpayers. And those two areas are in the area of personnel and in the area of procurement. And you're going to see on the area of personnel, it is a very balanced approach to personnel. It is not putting all of the authority in the town manager with respect to personnel, which some towns, such as our neighbors to the north and Groton and so forth, have. And secondly, on issues of procurement. By making these changes, it facilitates, if you will, the nuts and bolts of government. And when you hear town manager, think of the individual, the professional individual that is tasked with managing these functions on a day-to-day basis, where the Board of Selectmen remains as the chief executive body in these matters, but can focus on the larger issues before the town in the policy matters. As you'll see in my memo, and if you have difficulty sleeping tonight, this might help you. On page 1, I talk about what the article does, and we've covered a lot of that, but let's go to the second page as to what the article does not do. Because as you can imagine, there are a lot of questions whenever there is change put before any organization. So what does the article, what doesn't it do? The article does not change any of the authority and powers of the Ayer town meeting. So town meeting doesn't change, your role in town meeting doesn't change. Town meeting still has the ultimate authority on the budget. All real estate, real property acquisitions require ultimately approval by the Board of Selectmen. Town meeting. The transfer of funds, again, an act of town meeting. So it does not change the town meeting. Additionally, the article does not change the authority or the powers of the elected Board of Assessors, the elected Board of Health, the Conservation Commission, the Finance Committee, which remains appointed by the town moderator and is the sole authority on reserve fund transfers as well as review and advice on the budget, the elected Parks Commission, the elected Planning Board, or any of the other town's existing boards, commissions, and committees, with the exception of the Personnel Board, which I'll get into in just a moment. So there is where the change is. Though the article does provide limited changes in authority and duties of the town manager in the areas of personnel, procurement, and administration, the article does not change the authority of the elected Board of Selectmen as the chief executive body of the town. The Board of Selectmen currently, under our current system, appoint, hire, and fire and review the town administrator. They would do the same with respect to the town manager. Finally, what the article does not do, the article does not change the town's budgetary processes. In other words, the way we develop the budget will remain the same with myself and the finance director and the department heads putting together the budget, appearing before the finance committee for review, advice, and input. It does not affect the finance committee's right or authority to propose an alternative to the budget or to provide their own recommendations on the budget. And for the purposes of reserve fund transfers under Massachusetts statute, in terms of appointed boards, the Finance Committee does have to authorize that change as well. So there is no change there. Also, our capital planning process for the large items, equipment, vehicles, facilities, and so forth, the Capital Planning Committee obviously remains intact with the capital process, and those capital projects ultimately come before you at town meeting. Also, the existing appointment process for volunteer boards, commissions, and committees, volunteer, anything under the Board of Selectmen. As our system is now, appointments are made generally on recommendation from the town administrator, subject to approval by the selectmen. That would continue as the mechanism under the town manager form of government. So, in trying to, the article is a long article as written in the warrant. And so what I did with my memo is, as you can see on the article, there are sections A through R. And if you take my memo, I bolded in dark black where there are highlighted changes. And in most instances, you will see there is no change. So if we will just briefly start with section A in the article where there is a change. So the town manager will be able to hire and fire department head level positions with the consultation and approval of the Board of Selectmen. So in some forms of town manager government, that is all vested in the town manager. Here, because I think it is important with a check and balance, if you will, on the department head level, fire chief, police chief, etc., that, and again, when I say, especially on the firing part, people always get concerned. It's not just that you can just fire somebody, as I know you can all appreciate. This would be in accordance with the personnel policies and other governing parameters. Right now, with a town administrator, recommendation can be made, but it's ultimately the Board of Selectmen. In this proposed town manager form of government, that does not change with respect to department head level positions. So the big change is the town manager would be able to hire and fire non-department head positions in consultation with the respective department head, but will not require Board of Selectmen approval. And there are some exceptions to that. For example, the town of Ayer has a strong fire chief form of government, which means the position of fire chief can hire and fire within that department, even without Board of Selectmen approval now, though the chief, and I agree has always, as a courtesy, consulted with the Board of Selectmen. So currently, if there is, in terms of hiring support positions, so we're talking non-department head level positions, whether it's an admin assistant, a laborer in DPW, those positions, under this proposed form of government, the town manager, in consultation with the department head, would be able to hire these individuals. And unfortunately, in any organization, when it does happen, again, in accordance with either the appropriate union contract or the personnel policies, terminate that individual. So why is that significant? Well, a couple things. First of all, the issue of municipal personnel has become a professional industry. It's not like 20 years ago, 30 years, 40 years ago. It's very technical and detailed. The town of Ayer currently has 6 collective bargaining units, plus a personnel policy for non-union personnel, and there are individual contracts with various of the department heads. No volunteer is really going to have that level of expertise on all of those matters. Additionally, respectfully, the Board of Selectmen, as an elected board, also they have meetings the first and third Tuesdays of the month. Again, are elected volunteers, not necessarily have all of the professional knowledge pertaining to these issues. And therefore, even now, they rely heavily on the professional town administrator, the respective department head. So now, if there is an issue with an employee that has to be terminated, we have to go through a whole process that is somewhat cumbersome. And what I mean by that is, under the current system, the non-department head level positions still require approval from the Board of Selectmen for termination. And in many cases, these are very clear-cut cases. But what happens is we have to convene the Board of Selectmen, which is subject to the open meeting law, which requires a minimum of a 48-hour notice. In my experience here, and these things always happen under Murphy's Law over the summer or what have you, there has been a couple instances where we've had to put employees that should be terminated on paid administrative leave for up to almost 2 weeks until we could get a quorum of the Board of Selectmen together to hear the termination. So again, if you think of a professional business, or if you think of the military or so forth, that's why you hire a professional town administrator, or as we're proposing, a professional town manager with the credentials and the experience and the ability, along with the department heads, the professionals, to manage those day-to-day operations. However, because department head level positions are significant in terms of their scope and authority, under what I'm proposing, the Board of Selectmen would still have to authorize those hirings and firings in terms of the department heads, and also has always been the practice since I've been here at the town of Ayer, which I think is a good practice and we would continue, is on department head level vacancies. We've always used a search committee to hire the best candidates, and specifically in cases of the chief's positions, which we haven't had a vacancy in a while, or the DPW superintendent, ensuring that those committees, search committees, include citizen representatives. So that then, in addition, now to the third bullet, the town's personnel system will be centralized under the town manager, abolishing the appointed volunteer personnel board, and centralize the personnel system under the professional town manager in consultation with the department heads, Board of Selectmen, and Finance Committee. So respectfully, and this is not a reflection on any past member of the personnel board or any past personnel board, but the town of Ayer's personnel system, respectfully, is antiquated and is broken, And the proof in just my tenure here is, over the last 7 years, the proof is in the record. Our current system has a personnel board that is an appointed board by the Board of Selectmen. It's a 5-member board. It consists of a representative sent from the Finance Committee, an employee rep, and 3 appointments. These are volunteers. Again, anybody that's 18 years of age, registered in Ayer, lives in Ayer, can be on the personnel board. Our system is quite old in the sense that these volunteers are entrusted not only with the personnel policies and procedures, but also on matters of reclassification and other, again, day-to-day technical personnel matters. And so what has happened in recent years? In recent years, over the last 7 years, there's been a total, not at any given time, but a total amount of time equaling 3 years. Over 7 years, there was a 3-year period, not all at once, in which there was no quorum of the personnel board. So without a quorum of the personnel board, it's somewhat unclear. I mean, we're advised by counsel and so forth that it defers to the Board of Selectmen. So we've had quorum issues in the past with the personnel board. There have been criticisms, great criticisms of the personnel board that it has an employee rep on it, both pro and con. Additionally, to make a change to the personnel policies and procedures currently requires the personnel board to hold a public hearing to make those changes. And it is, again, and I'm talking minor changes, and it can be cumbersome. Example, last September, Mr. Johnston, who's the benefits and payroll manager, came to me, and the town of Ayer's CORI policy, the criminal records policy, was not in conformance with federal requirements. Our CORI policy was out of date. Under our current system, to change the CORI policy, and we're not talking fundamental changes that affect really the voters, but it's more of a, again, day-to-day managing administrative item. It took, no fault of that particular personnel board, because there were cancellations, there was not a quorum and so forth. It took almost 9 months to get a CORI policy updated, as well as the sexual harassment policy. Again, in 2017, these type of things, again, why you would hire professional people to manage those day-to-day things, to make things run smoothly. Now, additionally, why it says in consultation with the department heads, Board of Selectmen, and Finance Committee, is any personnel matters that have a financial impact is consultation with the Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, and frankly, ultimately, town meeting, because it goes to town meeting. What, again, in terms of our personnel policies and procedures moving forward, we obviously have a lot of work to do, but the current system is just not working, and it is also increasing the exposure of the town to, again, potential legal implications and costs. And I don't want to get into that in detail tonight, but again, there are specific examples of that over my tenure, which could have been prevented to the benefit of the town. Third, the town manager will be authorized to fix the compensation of all appointed officers and employees within the limits established by the budget and town meeting. So that's section D, for those of you who are following on either the warrant or my memo. And Susan mentioned this earlier. So again, that doesn't mean that the town manager is just going to assign salaries and raises and so forth to people following no system. We do have a non-union compensation system in place, and will obviously follow a system to do that. And in terms of the funding, again, consultation with the Finance Committee and through the budget process, again, is subject to approval. And that also goes for all of our union contracts are subject to appropriation by town meeting. The next sections E, F, and G, there are no changes. And what I mean by that, if you go to my job description on the website, these functions are currently, there's no change. The next change comes under section H, which is the town manager will have full jurisdiction over the rental and use of all town facilities. So currently, the Board of Selectmen made me the custodian of this building. The fire chief is responsible for the fire station, the police chief, the police station. There is no change to the library. The librarian is in charge of the library, and Mr. Wetzel, the DPW superintendent, is in charge of the DPW assets. So though technically the town manager ultimately would have the full jurisdiction over these assets, the system that we have through delegation, the respective chiefs and so forth would be responsible for their property and so forth. The next change, there's no change. The next change is under J. The town manager will have authorization to procure and execute all contracts under Chapter 30B without Board of Selectmen approval. All contracts are still subject to the budget and town meeting approval. Additionally, all contracts remain governed by applicable general statute and are subject to review and verification of funds by the town accountant. And as I mentioned, the town's capital planning process remains in place. So this is another recommendation of efficiency. Under our current system, there are dollar thresholds. All of Chapter 30B, if my memo doesn't put you to sleep, go to the Massachusetts Inspector General's website, Chapter 30B. 30B governs the purchasing of products that the town needs and services, goods and services. Under our current system, many of these contracts, after a certain threshold, require, again, approval by the Board of Selectmen. And we're not talking anything out of the ordinary. I mean, the large things, again, are subject to either their approval or town meeting. But this change would allow all of the smaller contracts under 30B to be approved by the town manager, obviously on recommendation by the respective department. Additionally, under the statute, the town accountant is legally responsible to verify that there's a financial appropriation for any contract. If there isn't, it's not to be executed. And ultimately, the funding for all of these, again, would be in the budget. And we have an accounts payable warrant, which I'll get to in a minute, that comes out every other week, is a public record. The town accountant and I, for a gold issue, want to get that so it's online for folks, but it is available on the counter in the selectman's office to be viewed. What happens now is if selectmen meetings, many of them are often bogged down with these small contracts that are basic items and so forth. And also there can be delays on the department end. The Board of Selectmen meets every other week or what have you. Again, not a criticism, but again, this is a recommendation of improvement in efficiency in services. Finally, for those that may be concerned that somehow this would give the town manager a blank check in terms of procurement, it actually is the opposite. 30B is highly regulated by the Inspector General's office. The town accountant is legally responsible to verify the funds, and we still have the budget process remains in place. Section K and L, there is no change. The next change is Section M. The town manager will be authorized to sign the payroll warrant and accounts payables warrant. Please note that both warrants currently are and will remain public records, and the town manager will issue a biweekly report on both warrants in the BOS meeting. Last year, Massachusetts passed the Government Modernization Act. Some of you may have heard of this. In the original draft, this was proposed for town administrators. It ended up through the legislative process on a compromise, and that compromise was that the Board of Selectmen could appoint one selectman to sign both of these warrants. What we're proposing in terms of the town manager form of government is that the town manager would be authorized to sign the payroll warrant and the accounts payable warrant. Again, We're looking at efficiencies in terms of the accountability, both of public records. I, as the town administrator now, along with the finance manager, do actively, in the other departments, review these in detail. Again, that's the proposed change there. Section N, O, P, Q, and R. The good news is there is no change there.
Q doesn't say no change.
Pardon?
Q doesn't say no change, there's actually something.
Oh, let me.
Is that just?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to, thank you. So section Q, there is a change. Thank you for catching that. And I've got it on page 4, which is, section Q has to do with the delegation of authority, which actually, if you go to page 4, we talk about. One of the things that I've been working with the departments over the last year is something called contingency and succession planning, which many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with in your professional careers as well. In terms of succession planning is what happens if something happens to an individual, how do you keep the continuity of, in this case, the local government going? And also, what's a contingency plan when things happen unexpected? So currently, as the town administrator, legally the town administrator does not have the authority to delegate certain functions, say, to another qualified department head. So if he or she became incapacitated on a short-term basis or something came up or so forth, we're now faced under our current system with, again, this unclear area. And that's another thing I think that this article, though it's long, another benefit is it specifically codifies out all of the functions in a public way in the centralized document. So if there's a temporary absence now, there's just an absence, and it would defer to the Board of Selectmen, but then we come back to, well, we have to convene the Board of Selectmen. So there was no contingency or succession plan, if you will. What this article does propose on a temporary absence, if the town manager with a letter to the town clerk and the Board of Selectmen may designate a qualified town administrative officer or employee to exercise the powers and duties of the town manager during a temporary absence or disability not in excess of 10 business days. So something happens, town manager is not here, he or she with the temporary absence could designate, let's say, the town finance manager, the responsibility of the town manager for that short-term period, or could delegate as Q, within reason, say the benefits and payroll manager, delegate authority with respect to the payroll on a very confined manner. Secondly, a vacancy. Any vacancy of the office of town manager shall be filled as soon as possible by the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen may appoint an interim town manager for a period of up to 6 months and may renew that period one time for an additional 6 months. And then the removal and suspension provision there is the same as the current system. And then the transitional provision, as I mentioned, if this passes town meeting and if it passes the legislature, when it would come into effect, I, as the incumbent town administrator, would become the first appointed town manager for the balance of my contractual term, which is a 3-year term that expires on June 30th of 2019. And so you understand, at least in terms of the town administrator's contract, the Board of Selectmen can choose not to renew that contract. There's a notification period. So the contract has an expiration, and they can choose not to renew it. The town manager could also, in a letter, choose not to renew it. And so, again, this will set the framework moving forward for the town and the Board of Selectmen to be able to hire the most professional town manager to manage your town's day-to-day operations, not to control your town, not to be the chief executive body, not to be a policymaker, but to manage the day-to-day operations. Also, this does give clarity also moving forward in the hiring process of potential applicants, that it clearly spells out the duties and responsibilities. So, I think, yeah. So with that, let me just show you graphically, and we're always open to suggestions on any of this. At the top box of the citizens of Ayer, town meeting is the ultimate authority. That's why we're here. From that, the people elect the Board of Assessors, no change. The Board of Library Trustees, this doesn't affect the library, is governed by a separate statute. The elected Board of Health, the elected Board of Selectmen, the elected Planning Board, the elected Parks Commission, the moderator is elected, and the moderator appoints the Finance Committee. So then, from the Board of Selectmen box, okay, under the proposal, the Board of Selectmen appoints the town manager. The town manager would recommend to the Board of Selectmen members of the Conservation Commission for appointment. That's how it is now. Same with the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Council on Aging, and the Historic Commission. Next. And then here is, again, on the sort of the staff level, of the personnel level changes. There's the town manager. As I mentioned over on the right, the fire chief, we have what they call a strong chief system. He makes all of the appointments for the fire department. Then you have, and we had to double them up in the boxes because the chart was longer than the Mondo pad, but the town manager, the police chief, and superintendent of public works report to the town manager, IT director and town accountant, town manager. We're proposing on Article 1, the town clerk, the treasurer collector, Article 2, payroll and benefits director, and so on. All of the departments reporting again to the town manager. Okay, so before we get to the questions, one last article, which is much shorter to explain, has been put forth by the Board of Selectmen. Article 4 is an act establishing an appointed tree warden. As many of you are aware, the town of Ayer currently has an elected tree warden. The position, he or she is elected by the voters and serves a 3-year term. The position is paid a stipend, which is set by town meeting, and then within that budget, there are some other monies that are appropriated through the budget for supplies and work from the tree warden. The Board of Selectmen have proposed making this appointed. As I mentioned in the beginning, if that was to be the route, the incumbent tree warden, who was just elected last year, would become the first appointed tree warden, and at minimum would serve out, when I say serve out, his term of 3 years. The board has put this forward, again looking to professionalize those services and put those services under a professional town manager. So that's that proposal for Article 4. So I know it is a lot of material. So at this time, why don't we take people's questions or clarifications? For those who came in later, just to housekeeping, it is being filmed. We ask you to state your name and your question, and we're going to post the question and the answer, not tonight, but by the end of the week, to the website, because if you have the question, most likely other people do. And we ask, again, we're talking about clarifications and information tonight. We ask that political remarks, advocacy, pros, cons, that's what town meeting is all about. And bring that energy on the 23rd. Yes.
Good evening, Pauline Conley. First question is actually for both, first for Sue and for Robert. Those of you who have a copy of the Town Government Study Committee report could follow along on page 5, if you'd like. Town Government Study Committee recommended that the town amend the tax collector's position to that of the town collector. And I know Sue mentioned that this is that distinction, sorry. And that the treasurer, town collector, and a joint tax or town collector treasurer position be under the finance manager, who would be Ms. Labrie. Most people refer to her as a town accountant, but she has been the finance manager for quite a few years, maybe 10, if not more. And then the finance manager would then report to the town, the reports as administrator. If the change is made, then obviously to the town manager. It's a long question, but the simple question is there a particular reason why the tax collector position shouldn't be a town collector so it can collect all fees and money that is actually owed to the town centralized in this one location? That was a long discussion we had on this committee, and it does, if we're talking efficiency of government, that's the most efficient way of getting the money into the town. So if you could address that, and then if Mr. Pomfrey wants to as well.
Want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is a great question, because it has come up again in a lot of discussions leading up to now. Why? Because I didn't find in all my discussions and talking to different people here in the town, voters in the town, no one said town collector. It's still viewed that the DPW office does their job of collecting their revenue, because that would consolidate it over to here. There's a parking clerk, different departments that handle. So overall, it was viewed as too much disruption. And for myself, I just had to go with that guidance and trying to weigh out the good versus bad. And I think it was more of just the tax collector and treasurer being combined as opposed to it becoming a town collector. Any feedback just, it was squashed for myself, any feedback that I received. So it just wasn't, and overall, like I said, I separated the town clerk to its own separate position in a tax collector treasurer. So for me, that was, because that's currently what I am for those three. So I kind of had to make it the three positions that I have, the three titles I have, that's what I worked with. I didn't want to be too reaching at this time. So that's for myself, and trying to not make it about the person. I'm trying to make it about the positions. So.
Exactly, and that's exactly the point of my question is a position change, not an individual change. Mr. Pomfrey, as a follow-up to my question to Sue, if you could elaborate on the efficiency of having all the money come here. We've discussed this when I was on the Board of Selectmen. It's been discussed for years since this town government study report came out in 2011. And it was a unanimous decision of the committee that that change be made. I know we attempted it a number of years back and it didn't work. But also, in addition to the efficiency component, why the treasurer collector would not report to the finance manager, which was also a unanimous recommendation.
So first, on the issue of the tax collector versus a town collector, just for everybody's benefit, as the question illustrated, there is a difference in Massachusetts. The tax collector collects the property taxes. And a town collector form of government, which was recommended by the 2010 Town Government Study Committee, which also made a series of other recommendations that ultimately not acted on by town meeting. The town collector would collect all money in a centralized location. This structure is something that is still evolving across the Commonwealth in terms of the position. Ms. Copeland is correct from our vantage point that there was not, and I understand that in 2010, the recommendation of the committee was not a lot of support. One of the things that challenges too is the salary for such a position, as far as we have found to be considerably higher than the proposal here. And I think ultimately as a town, not opposed to further exploring that, but in 2010, that was explored in detail. It was made as a recommendation. It was categorically turned down by town meeting. And again, we're looking to make incremental change, but that definitely is probably a trend. To the second question, in 2010, it was recommended, and you have that report, of the creation of a finance department. And we currently have a finance manager / town accountant. She is the finance manager, but here's one of the challenges. As the finance manager under our current system, there is an elected treasurer and an elected tax collector that have no accountability to the finance manager under our current system. So it was proposed to create a finance department with these individuals reporting to the finance manager and reporting to the town manager. Again, as I think you can all appreciate from tonight, there are multiple permutations that we could get into in terms of government organization. Again, the finance manager, the incumbent, in my opinion, is one of the best. The respected financial departments already do report to her, but under our proposed system, these individual department heads would ultimately report to the town manager. But that was a recommendation in 2010 to create a finance department, and over the last year and a half, we've done that informally, internally. In other words, I meet bi-weekly with the internal finance team, which is the town finance manager, Ms. Copeland, who holds both positions, Mr. Johnston, and myself.
And one real
Sure.
quick question for you.
Yeah.
Robert, do you still have the big red binder of all the materials from the Town Government Study Committee?
Yes.
So if anybody was curious about the discussions, the minutes,
Yep.
the information that was reviewed, it can be available?
So to answer that question, that we have a big red binder. What you have is the executive summary of the recommendations from 2010. We have in the office, and I'll talk to IT about getting it online. You'll also see it references a series of documents that committee looked at, and those are public records. They're available in the office for viewing, and we'll see what we can do to get that information online.
Maybe just the minutes, because there's hundreds of pages.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Mr. Patton and then Mr. Maxon.
Michael Patterson.
Yep.
Just to follow up on this, if I may, there's only two things that I'm aware of which are not paid here. One is water and sewer bills. The other would be things like the fee for a permit to carry. Would they be collected centrally as well?
To Mr. Patton's question, under this proposal, no. What the previous question that was brought up, under a town collector, that individual office collects all funds. So in other words, the property taxes, water, sewer, parks and rec permits, rental fees for town hall, you name it, it goes to one location.
And the second question was to do with the first slide. The first position practically doubled the salary from 32 to 65. The second one was about a 60% increase, presumably for the same job. But there was one other point. Okay, these jobs would now presumably attract town benefits. Okay, the first one up there is a part-time, presumably no town benefits. You get full-time, attract town benefits. And it's peanuts in the greater scheme of things, but you should add the cost of town benefits to that cost, whatever it is.
Okay. Mr. Matson?
1914 William Street. I heard a term used tonight in a different way from I heard it used before, the strong chief law. Now, my understanding of that strong chief law has used over the years referred to the police chief and referred to his job security in terms of measures that have to be followed to terminate the police chief. Tonight I heard it referring to the fire chief in terms of his management authority with his personnel. Could you clarify whether there is one term being used, strong chief law, to mean those two things, or what the difference may be?
Okay, so the question is the issue of strong chief and the difference. Our fire chief is what we call a strong chief. In this case, we're talking from administrative authority, appointing authority. So in Ayer, the fire chief can, as a strong chief, hire and fire the firemen in the specific personnel under that position. The police chief, again, the hiring and firing of police officers under the current system, dispatchers and so forth, requires approval of the Board of Selectmen. Under the proposed change, police and dispatchers could be hired by the chief with approval from the town manager. So we don't have a strong police chief. There is a distinction. The fire chief can make those appointments. The police chief cannot.
My understanding of the term used for the police chief was it related to his job security. That the strong police chief had to, if the Board of Selectmen, for example, wanted to terminate the police chief, the strong chief law protected him through certain procedures that needed to be followed before they could be terminated. Whereas without that strong chief law, you could just be hired and fired as selectmen wish. I thought there was a distinction there.
Frank, respectfully, not that I'm aware of. In other words, the police chief and the fire chief could both, under our current system, ultimately be fired by the Board of Selectmen for cause, obviously. Under our proposed system, same thing, it would be recommendation by the town manager, but it would be subject to approval by the Board of Selectmen, which is a key distinction in town manager form of government, because in Groton to the north, it's all vested in the town manager can hire and fire the fire chief and the police chief. We didn't feel that that is appropriate for the town, especially on this town, on the department head level. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Rick Otte, Oak Ridge Drive.
Yeah.
You spoke of the barriers, and I appreciate that, of the volunteer personnel committee. Will you be missing anything by not having?
Would be missing anything. Well, I think firstly, the volunteers in civic involvement is the lifeblood of the town, not just here, anywhere. And I'm very sensitive, and I mean this when I say the comments that I offer about the personnel system are not a reflection of volunteers past, present, or current. It's the nature of personnel. In other words, personnel now, as I think you can appreciate, is municipal personnel is highly specialized. It's really on a day-to-day level. We're talking about people's jobs and livelihoods, and there is a certain, again, level of expertise and sensitivity and timeliness that needs to be done to address those. Now, make no mistake that the town of Ayer will have, as it does now, have very clear personnel policies and procedures. And that does not preclude there being a role for citizens in that. I have not completely ruled that out in the sense of appellate board or so forth. The issue is that we have to build it up from the bottom again. Other questions or clarifications? Yes, sir.
Mark Phillips. So with regards to the town manager being able to hire and fire folks, wouldn't that require a change to the collective bargaining agreements at all? Is that already written in?
Very good question. So the question is, if we go with this change on the non-department head levels in terms of hiring and firing, what about unionized personnel? We have 6 collective bargaining agreements. As we're advised from council on this, if this change would go through, it would take on those positions, the level of the Board of Selectmen and change it to town manager legally. Now, procedurally, of course, we would meet with all of the unions to impact bargain that change, because it's required, whenever you make a change to a contract in municipal government, you have to have a meeting of the parties. Now, could the union take issue with that? Of course. I mean, unions take issues with things all the time. As we understand it, however, if this change was legally passed by town meeting and adopted by the legislature, ultimately on legal ground, it would be the town manager's authority.
But the union can still take issue with it.
The union could take issue with it, but we've been advised that with the legal change, that ultimately the town would prevail in the matter. Yes.
Hi, Lee DeLuca, Pingree Way. I try to follow town government as best I can when I have the time and opportunity, so forgive me if this is a bit simplistic for those of you who follow along and have the opportunity more than I do. The appointed versus hired, I'm assuming it's just the fact that somebody's, like, to me, it's like getting hired with a 3-year contract. Like, what's the appointed versus hired?
Oh, in terms of the use of the term?
Right.
Yeah. There is a level of synonym there, if you will. In other words, hired or appointed. So you could say, in this case, that on a department head level position was hired by the town administrator, by the town manager with approval by the Board of Selectmen. But appointment is you're appointed for a specific term.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then I've looked and I haven't found it. I've wondered if there are job descriptions for each of these positions. And I was also curious about the town clerk had been 20 hours currently, but is being bumped up to 40, but I don't see anything to indicate the role of that position changing.
Okay.
So I was curious about that as
Yeah.
well.
Good questions. So in terms of the job descriptions, if you go to the town's website, which for everybody's benefit is www.ayer.ma.us, and you go to the personnel tab. On the personnel tab, you'll then you'll see the town's non-union compensation plan, but you'll also find the official job descriptions for all of the positions, okay? When we did the classification study, though the treasurer, tax collector, and town clerk positions were elected as they are now, we did submit the job descriptions for classification, which that's where the grade 11 comes out. As mentioned earlier, technically the town clerk, you could argue, is a part-time position in terms of the compensation. Obviously, in our proposed system, it would be a full-time position. And this salary here reflects the incumbent position holder. In other words, under our system, the positions are graded and there are 11 steps. and we hire usually for new hires are hired between step 1 and 3. This, again, would, if we get to that point, would go through the public process and come to the Board of Selectmen. The recommendation of the incumbent town clerk, if this change, would be a grade 11, step 5.
Right, but I was focusing on it having been
Mhm.
listed as 20 hours, bumping up to 40 hours. I was just curious if anything's changing about that role that would create that bump, or like why?
I think, and I'll let Ms. Copeland can speak to it better, just quickly from my perspective, the job description, those job duties and responsibilities haven't changed, but without question, it's a full-time job. In other words, you could, again, with the elected thing, you could have an individual moving forward that says, look, it's 20 hours a week, that's what I'm doing. Or he or she could say, I'm not going to do anything. And there's no mechanism except very cumbersome recall procedure, or you have to wait 3 years. But I'll let Susan, you may want to elaborate more on the change.
So here for the town, it does seem like a jump, but it's always been a full-time position. What happens is if you really looked at it as only a part-time position, continued it as a part-time position, you continue to put the additional work onto the assistant, which is a full-time appointed, because they go through like the same appointed process. But the workflow is still there, the guidelines are still there, and it's an assumed position of 40 hours. If I was to put up only 20 hours, like I'm only in Mondays 1 to 4 and break it down to 20 hours, it wouldn't work. So right now it is a balancing act. There's a lot of hours, and that's okay. I'm not saying it's a lot of hours. It is a lot. In our town, the residents, and I say this in the nicest way, is demanding. They demand that office open. They expect that office open. And there is a very high level of efficiency that comes out of that office for years, decades. And that should and will always continue. But it is essentially a 40-hour, and that is why the positions need to reflect that. It needs to be a town clerk and the tax collector treasurer positions combined, because those can combine to the full-time. So it's shifting it from the assumed part-time town clerk tax collector has always been put together, and those hours make up your full-time and the full-time treasurer. And as the way that the workflow actually best works in the offices is to shift it, which I probably, when I first ran in 2014, didn't appreciate it, and didn't appreciate the town clerk as the full-time position. And now I can say, having worked it for 3 years, I can see that it is definitely a full-time position. And with especially respect towards the assistants in that office and the support staff, which does not get recognized, but that's different, and I don't want to start a debate.
More or
But,
less an old description and catching up with the reality of today.
right,
Okay.
yeah. So, is that,
Yep.
okay.
Thank you.
As a follow-on to that, is there going to be any reassignment in positions for whoever's currently the clerk assistants? Are they,
A reassignment of,
well, are they going to be somebody else's assistants, or are they going to be let go, or the clerk's position itself is now appointed?
no, not at all. This is not to consolidate or remove any positions. Again, this is a town, the way town clerk positions are looked at and rated, and I reached out to, in the association, and when I asked, do you have a full-time clerk position? Do you have a full-time assistant, part-time assistant? And you say, well, we're residents of just over 7,000 residents, 5,500 registered voters. We have a hospital in town. It is not a birthing hospital, which is a different birthing hospitals That's an increase in work. But you have a hospital, we also have a nursing home and assisted living. Those add different values as well. So we have the 2 precincts, we're in-house. There's so many different options to it. Yes, a full-time assistant town clerk is very important in this town. And again, if you're coming to look for some of your needs, I think it's obvious that those 2 positions are full-time and needed in this town. It's a busy office, rightfully so.
Other questions, anybody we haven't heard from that has a question or clarification? And if not, we'll go back around again. Oh, yes, sir.
Hi, Jonathan Grant. Can you go to our neighbors and talk about this forum tonight and preparing people for the 23rd? It seems to me that the key issue is this transformation of positions from elected to appointed. And in describing that transition, do you think it's fair to say that we're sacrificing some degree of participatory democracy reflected in volunteerism for a greater degree of professionalism that's required in just more complex roles?
Yeah, I'll go first. That's part of it. We're asking, yes, and people have brought this up. Well, these positions have always been elected. That's the method that they were selected. However, as we've illustrated tonight, and this is no, again, reflection on past, present folks, the realm of municipal government has become increasingly detailed and professional, even over the last 20 years, let alone the last 30 years, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're looking at, all of these proposed changes are about improving the efficiency of government, specifically on a day-to-day basis, and on delivering the higher level of service to the residents, and also developing some protections for the town moving forward, because there are some fundamental gaps in our system, specifically speaking to the Article 3 on town manager in terms of procurement and personnel that are very specific, that have significant legal and financial implications to the town. But yeah. Mr. Cadigan.
Jack Cadigan. Am I correct in the following observation? What I'm hearing is a shift whereby policy-making activities remain elected and under the control of the citizenry, whereas highly technical and administrative functions that increasingly in this world demand a higher degree of professionalism, training, response to the legislature and federal laws, those are being moved to appointed, where people have to come forward with the credentials to say they are competent in those complex areas. But the voter is still in control of the policy. Is that?
I would agree with your assessment, yes. Yes, and as I mentioned, and that's why I highlight, the role of town meeting does not change, and the role of all of the elected folks that are accountable to you, elected by you, does not change, and it focuses on policy and leadership of the town. And that's why the proposed changes in the town manager, in the name, what's town administrator to town manager, the real focus on the change is some personnel changes and procurement changes. Again, day-to-day, vote on nuts and bolts. Still maintaining, for example, even on the department head level, that the Ayer town manager can't just at he or she's will hire and fire department head level positions. It still requires the elected board of selectmen to authorize that.
And that seems like a best management practice.
Mm-hmm. I believe that it is. Now, there are people that disagree, and there are forms, like I keep mentioning our friends to the north, Groton, for example, that town manager has further authority in their form than what we're proposing.
But certainly, I see the tax collector, for example, some of those activities like that, just highly technical, not policy. They're, I won't say changing the crank, but they're technical. They're not setting policy in the town.
Agreed. I would agree with your assessment. Yes?
In follow-up to John's question regarding policy and town meeting, unless something has changed, it's my understanding that the Board of Selectmen set policy for the town. Town meeting essentially approves the budget and other expenditures, approves bylaws, and excuse me. Other than that, it's basically a financial meeting, because at least in May, the majority of the questions deal with the budget and other appropriations as opposed to policy making. If you could give an example of a policy established by town meeting, that it would certainly help me, because I can't remember one, which is not to say one didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue, and you mentioned, like, in terms of a bylaw, the town meeting has to approve bylaws. I think the bylaws in themselves encapsulates a considerable policy consideration. But you have, I think, summarized the major functions of town meeting.
Just as a note also to, when you go home and think of the change, because it's change, and you like it, you don't like it. But there's change coming in the next 5 to 7 years that I have said to my colleagues, and I laugh because I brought it up, and some of them were like, oh yeah, I guess. There is change happening in this government in the next 5 to 8 years. What change? People are retiring. People have met their years of service. We have people in this town that have worked over 20 years tirelessly, and we are where we are financially and in a good place because of those efforts. And rightfully so, they have worked to earn that golden ticket of retirement. But we are going to see a lot of change. So when I say that, the change is, and I already double checked with all of them before I throw them out there, but your police chief, your fire chief, your DPW superintendent, our beloved accountant, Kevin, our HR benefits manager, Cindy, our IT, even council on aging. There's going to be a lot of change coming in the next couple of years. And so why bring it up again? Because let's have this discussion. Let's think about it. If you need more information, we'll get it out there. But it's just time to talk about it again, because there is going to be more change, and the more efficient we can be, and that we maintain our soundness financially, we're doing really good. We have a lot of great people that work for this town. We want to maintain who we have and continue moving forward. If we want to start the change or throw a stick in the spoke and start messing things up, people are going to start jumping ship. We don't want that. We want people to come in. They are very qualified. They're going to continue to lead us, and they eventually, in 20, 25 years, retire from the town. We want to keep that momentum going. So it's just something to think about, that there's inevitable change that is coming. So if you can work towards it the best way we can, then it's just all the better for us, and we don't have any other, we're going to have issues, but this is just coming as an employee here and talking to the employees here. It's something to think about. So it is.
And on that, in terms of concluding remarks, and we, of course, will stay and happy to answer further questions. Change is inevitable in any aspect of life. We all know that. And change is also, can be a very scary thing, a very suspicious thing. We have a very cynical view of change. It's human nature, I believe. What we are putting forth for your consideration, however, on October 23rd, are the first step are moderated changes. And I want to emphasize that they are not far sweeping changes that could have been put forth in terms of duties and so forth. It is a step that is based on best practices that is recommended from experts in the field, and is really with two things in mind: improved service to you, and secondly, preparation for the future. The other thing, as I know you're all aware of, the beauty of any form of government and any form of system, this is not, if you will, the final destination. In other words, there will be other changes and so forth that will have to come forward at some point, and we'll have to go through the process of government. And some recommendations, that's the other challenging thing. It's also an exciting thing. There are many permutations to the town manager form of government. As we heard from question in the audience from the 2010 report, there are many permutations to finance department, tax collector versus town collector. We feel that what we have put forth is a proper fit for the town of Ayer and is a change in the right direction. So in terms of next steps, we need you to tell all of your friends and neighbors in town about the forum. If they need the materials, we're going to get the materials online. This will be online, as I mentioned. If they have questions, if they need material, come to town hall. We'll get it to them because we want everybody to have all of the information. Also, as we mentioned, if you have neighbors or friends that are not registered to vote at the town meeting, the deadline is this Friday. The town clerk's office will be open till 8 p.m. Get them to register. And then finally, the most important thing, as always, is to attend the town meeting on October 23rd at 7 p.m. at the high school auditorium. But in the meantime, we'll continue to keep you informed. If you have any questions, that's what we're here for. So in the interest of time, it's been 90 minutes. We're going to end the televised portion of the forum. And then if there are additional questions or concerns, be happy to stay and answer them for you. Or if individuals have any specific questions about any of the other articles, I'd be happy to stay and answer those. So again, thank you for your interest. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. And at the latest, we'll see you on October 23rd, if not before. Thank you.
Thank you.